The morning sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Serenity Springs Wellness Center, casting geometric shadows across the polished bamboo floors. Rachel Morrison adjusted her yoga mat for the third time, trying to find the perfect alignment with the room's energy flow. At 62, she had been teaching yoga for over 30 years, and her Tuesday morning class had become the most exclusive session in downtown Portland. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you. Make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Today's class was different. Rachel could feel the tension the moment her regular students began filing in. Whispered conversations died abruptly when certain people entered. Nervous glances were exchanged across the room. The usual pre-class meditation music seemed to amplify the underlying anxiety rather than soothe it. Among the familiar faces, one stood out. A woman in her mid-40s with unremarkable brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore standard black leggings and a gray tank top, nothing that would draw attention. She had introduced herself as Diana Walsh when she'd started coming to classes 3 weeks ago, always paying in cash, always arriving exactly 5 minutes before the session began. What made Diana unusual wasn't her appearance or behavior during class. She was an adequate student, not particularly flexible, and didn't push herself into advanced poses. She followed instructions precisely, maintained proper breathing, and never disrupted the flow. If anything, she was forgettable, but Rachel had noticed things. The way Diana's eyes continuously scanned the room during supposedly meditative moments. How she always positioned herself near the back corner where she could see all entrances and exits. The fact that she never seemed to actually relax, even during final Savasana when everyone else melted into the floor. Today's tension reached a breaking point when Senator Catherine Blackwood arrived with her usual entourage of security personnel. The senator had been coming to Rachel's classes for 2 years, finding them a peaceful respite from her high-pressure political career. Her bodyguards typically waited in the lobby, but today they seemed more alert, more watchful. 15 minutes into the session, during a particularly challenging warrior sequence, Rachel noticed Diana's breathing pattern had changed. While everyone else was struggling with the physical demands of the pose, Diana's respiration remained perfectly controlled. Her heart rate appeared unchanged. It was as if the physical challenge of yoga was completely secondary to whatever mental processing she was conducting. The breaking point came during partner poses. Rachel had paired students randomly, encouraging trust and connection through assisted stretches. When Diana was partnered with Jonathan Myers, a tech entrepreneur who had recently testified before Congress about foreign election interference, something shifted in the room's energy. "I'm sorry," Diana said quietly, stepping away from Jonathan. "I don't feel comfortable with partner work today." Rachel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room temperature. In 30 years of teaching, she had developed an intuition about people, about the energy they brought into sacred space. Diana's energy wasn't peaceful or seeking wellness. It was calculating, predatory, waiting. "Diana, perhaps you'd be more comfortable in one of our beginner classes," Rachel said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had guided thousands of students through physical and spiritual transformation. "This intermediate session might not be the right fit for your current practice level." The words hung in the air like incense smoke. Diana's face remained perfectly neutral, but something in her eyes flickered. Not embarrassment or disappointment, but evaluation. She was measuring Rachel, calculating something behind those unremarkable brown eyes. "I understand," Diana replied, rolling up her mat with mechanical precision. "Thank you for the suggestion." As Diana gathered her belongings and headed toward the exit, Rachel caught something that made her blood freeze. For just a moment, as Diana passed Senator Blackwood, her hand moved to her hip in a gesture so subtle it was almost invisible. But Rachel saw it. More importantly, She recognized it 20-5 years earlier, before yoga, before wellness centers, before her spiritual awakening. Rachel Morrison had been Rachel Martinez, working for a government agency that didn't officially exist. She had been trained to recognize threat assessment behaviors, to identify individuals who posed dangers to protected persons. Diana Walsh moved like someone conducting reconnaissance. Her casual glances weren't random, they were methodical cataloging. Her positioning in the room wasn't about yoga practice, it was about tactical advantage. And that gesture near her hip was muscle memory from someone accustomed to carrying concealed weapons. As the class continued, Rachel's mind raced through the other students present. Senator Blackwood was obvious, but there were others who might attract dangerous attention. Dr. Amanda Foster, who had recently published controversial research about pharmaceutical industry corruption. David Chun, whose investigative journalism had exposed several high-profile political scandals. Lisa Rodriguez, a federal prosecutor known for taking on organized crime cases. What if Diana hadn't been randomly attending these classes? What if she had specifically chosen Tuesday mornings because of who attended? What if she had been studying them, learning their routines, identifying vulnerabilities? Rachel's hands trembled slightly as she guided the class through cool-down stretches. She maintained her serene teacher facade, while her mind processed possibilities that terrified her. If Diana was what Rachel suspected, then everyone in this room could be in immediate danger. The class ended with the traditional namaste, but Rachel felt anything but peaceful. As students filed out, chatting about their evening plans and weekend activities, Rachel realized that Diana's sudden departure might not have been a retreat. It might have been activation. She had asked the wrong person to leave. And now that person knew exactly where to find every potential target, exactly when they would be most vulnerable, exactly how to access them when their guard was down. Rachel Morrison had built a sanctuary of peace and wellness in the heart of Portland. But she had accidentally created something else entirely, a hunting ground for someone who specialized in making problems disappear permanently. The bamboo floors that had witnessed thousands of hours of meditation and healing now felt like a stage where something much darker was about to unfold. And Rachel was the only person who suspected what was coming. The first incident happened 36 hours after Diana Walsh walked out of Serenity Springs Wellness Center. Senator Catherine Blackwood was leaving her favorite coffee shop on Burnside Street when a delivery truck ran a red light, heading straight for the crosswalk where she stood checking her phone. The truck should have hit her. Security camera footage later showed the massive vehicle bearing down at 40 miles per hour, with no signs of braking. Senator Blackwood remained oblivious, absorbed in reading urgent legislative updates, her bodyguards momentarily distracted by a street performer drawing their attention. Instead, the truck's front axle snapped without warning. The vehicle lurched violently to the right, crashed into a row of parked cars, and came to a grinding halt 6 feet from where the senator stood. The driver, who had been unconscious at the wheel from what medics later determined was a sudden insulin shock, regained consciousness moments after impact with no memory of the previous 10 minutes. Mechanical failure, the police report concluded. Faulty welding on a stress point caused catastrophic axle failure at the precise moment needed to prevent fatalities. But Rachel Morrison knew better. She had spent Tuesday evening calling in favors from her former life, reaching out to contacts she hadn't spoken to in decades. By Wednesday morning, she had confirmation of her worst fears. Diana Walsh didn't exist. The identity was a fabrication so sophisticated it fooled standard background checks, but crumbled under deeper investigation. The second incident occurred Thursday evening. Dr. Amanda Foster was working late in her research laboratory at Oregon Health Sciences University when a gas leak developed in the building's main heating system. By the time she noticed the smell, carbon monoxide levels should have been lethal. Instead, She found herself unaccountably drawn to open all the windows in her lab, despite the fact that she had been deeply focused on data analysis and had no conscious reason to interrupt her work. The fresh air circulation saved her life. When hazmat teams arrived an hour later, they confirmed that without the window ventilation, she would have been unconscious within minutes and dead within the hour. Lucky intuition, the fire department investigator noted. Sometimes people sense danger before they consciously recognize it. Rachel wasn't buying coincidences anymore. She began tracking the people who had been in that Tuesday morning yoga class, monitoring news reports, checking social media for any signs of accidents or close calls. What she discovered made her realize that Diana Walsh wasn't just a threat. She was actively engaged in eliminating targets, but something was going wrong with Diana's mission. Each assassination attempt was failing in ways that suggested sabotage rather than luck. The pattern became clear Friday night when David Chun, the investigative journalist, was leaving a restaurant in the Pearl District. His car had been parked in a multi-level garage, and elevator security cameras showed him entering alone on the 4th floor. But when he reached his vehicle, he found all 4 tires had been slashed. Frustrated, but not particularly alarmed, David called for a rideshare. 20 minutes later, as he waited by the garage exit, a section of concrete ceiling collapsed exactly where his car had been parked. The structural engineers who investigated determined that a water pipe had been slowly leaking for months, weakening the support beams until catastrophic failure was inevitable. If he had driven out normally, the timing would have put him directly under the collapse, the lead engineer told reporters. Whoever vandalized his tires actually saved his life. Rachel began to understand what was happening. Someone was systematically preventing Diana Walsh from completing her assignments. Each intended victim was being protected by what appeared to be random acts of vandalism, mechanical failures, or inexplicable, intuitive warnings. The protector was operating with the same level of sophistication as the assassin. They knew Diana's plans before she executed them. They understood her methods well enough to create countermeasures that appeared completely natural. Most importantly, they were doing it all without revealing themselves or alerting authorities. Preparing and narrating. This story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Rachel's breakthrough came when she remembered something from her old training. The most effective way to stop an assassin wasn't to arrest them or confront them directly. It was to make their mission impossible to complete while preserving the appearance that they were simply having bad luck. Someone with access to Diana's operational intelligence was systematically sabotaging her work. But who would have that level of inside information? Who could anticipate her moves with such precision? And why were they protecting people who didn't even know they were in danger? The answer became clear Saturday morning when Lisa Rodriguez, the federal prosecutor, received an anonymous package at her home address. Inside was a detailed dossier documenting a conspiracy to eliminate key figures investigating corruption in defense contracting. The evidence was so comprehensive, so precisely documented, that it could only have come from someone with access to the highest levels of the operation. But the most chilling part of the package was a handwritten note. Your yoga instructor has better instincts than most federal agents. Trust them. Rachel stared at the news report about the mysterious evidence package, her mind racing. Someone knew she had identified Diana Walsh as a threat. Someone had been watching the watchers. And that someone had decided to flip the entire operation, turning the hunter into the hunted. Diana Walsh was still out there, still dangerous, still committed to completing her mission. But now she was operating blind, her every move anticipated, and countered by an opponent who understood her methods better than she understood herself. The question that terrified Rachel was simple. Who was protecting them? And what did they want in return? Because in her experience, guardian angels always came with a price. And that price was usually higher than the original threat. Rachel Morrison hadn't used her old skill set in 25 years, but muscle memory proved stronger than time. Sunday evening found her hunched over a laptop in her apartment, fingers moving across keys with the fluid precision of someone who had once navigated the darkest corners of digital intelligence gathering. The anonymous note about her instincts had been the key. Someone knew she had identified Deanna Walsh as a threat, which meant someone had been monitoring the yoga studio. Rachel's first step was to examine the building's security systems, not as a wellness center owner, but as someone trained to identify surveillance vulnerabilities. What she discovered chilled her. Serenity Springs had been comprehensively compromised. Micro cameras had been installed in air vents, listening devices embedded in decorative plants, and network taps placed on internet routers. The surveillance was so sophisticated that it had taken her hours of methodical searching to locate even half the equipment. But here was the puzzling part. There were two distinct surveillance systems operating simultaneously. One was clearly Diana's work, professional-grade equipment focused on identifying routines, mapping escape routes, and documenting when targets were most vulnerable. The other system was monitoring Diana's surveillance, creating a surveillance network watching the watchers. Rachel traced the secondary system's data feeds through a maze of encrypted servers and proxy networks. The digital architecture was familiar. It matched protocol she had learned decades ago in a classified training program that officially never existed. Whoever was protecting her yoga students had been trained by the same people who had trained her. The breakthrough came when she analyzed the timing of the protective interventions. The truck's axle failure, Dr. Foster's sudden need for fresh air, David Chun's slashed tires. Each incident had been triggered by remote manipulation of systems that weren't supposed to be accessible to outside interference. Rachel dug deeper into each event, using techniques that felt like riding a bicycle after years away. The delivery truck's axle had been weakened using a targeted electromagnetic pulse that created metal fatigue at precisely the right moment. Dr. Foster's sudden urge to open windows had been triggered by subsonic audio frequencies that influenced subconscious behavior. David Chun's tires had been slashed by a micro-drone so small it didn't register on security cameras. This wasn't luck or coincidence. This was technological warfare conducted by someone with access to equipment that existed at the bleeding edge of classified research. Monday morning brought Rachel's first direct contact with her mysterious protector. A package arrived at the wellness center with no delivery service markings, containing a secure phone and a single text message. Conference Room B, Downtown Marriott, 3 p.m. today. Come alone. Your students' lives depend on it. Rachel's training screamed warnings about obvious traps, but her intuition suggested something different. If this person wanted to harm her, they had already demonstrated capabilities that made elaborate deceptions unnecessary. She decided to take the risk. Conference Room B was empty when she arrived, but a laptop on the table was running a secure video call application. The screen showed only darkness, but a voice emerged from the speakers, digitally altered, untraceable but unmistakably intelligent. Rachel Martinez, the voice said, using her original surname. Former analyst with the Strategic Intelligence Division, honorably discharged after the Prague incident. You've been living quietly for 25 years. Why are you suddenly asking dangerous questions? Because someone is trying to kill my students, Rachel replied. And someone else is stopping them. I want to know who both parties are. Diana Walsh is a contractor working for a private military company called Blackstone Solutions. Her assignment is to eliminate 5 individuals whose ongoing work threatens certain defense industry contracts worth approximately $3 billion. The methods must appear accidental to prevent congressional investigation. Rachel felt the old familiar chill of classified briefings where human lives were reduced to operational parameters. And who are you? Someone who believes those 5 individuals shouldn't die for corporate profit margins. Someone who has been tracking Diana Walsh for 6 months, waiting for her to reveal her full target list. The voice explained that Diana was part of a larger operation. Blackstone Solutions had identified 12 potential threats to their clients' interests, but they were only moving against 5 targets initially, a test run to evaluate their new methods. If successful, 7 more assassinations would follow. The people in your yoga class aren't random victims, the voice continued. They were specifically selected because they represented the greatest threat to ongoing defense contracts and biological weapons research, election security systems, and foreign military aid programs. Rachel's mind raced through the implications. Senator Blackwood chaired the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee. Dr. Foster's research had exposed dangerous side effects in military pharmaceuticals. David Chun had been investigating contractor fraud in overseas operations. Lisa Rodriguez was prosecuting cases involving illegal arms sales. Why not just alert authorities? Rachel asked. Because 3 members of the Congressional Oversight Committee are receiving funding from Blackstone's parent company. Because the FBI division that would handle this investigation has been compromised by a mole we haven't identified. Because warning the targets directly would force Blackstone to accelerate their timeline and change their methods. The voice revealed that Diana Walsh was actually the 2nd assassin assigned to this operation. The first had been eliminated 3 months ago when she got too close to discovering the protective surveillance network. Diana doesn't know she's being monitored. She believes her mission failures are due to her own operational security problems. We intend to keep her believing that while we document her entire network and identify everyone involved in the conspiracy, Rachel began to understand the larger game being played. Her mysterious protector wasn't just saving 5 lives, they were using Diana's operation to expose an entire assassination network that threatened democratic institutions. "What do you need from me?" Rachel asked. "Continue your normal routine. Diana will return to your yoga class within the next week. When she does, we need you to behave exactly as you did before. Observant, but not paranoid. Concerned, but not confrontational. She's starting to suspect that someone is interfering with her work, but she hasn't identified the source of the interference." The screen went dark, but the voice continued. "Rachel, there's something else you should know. Diana Walsh isn't just any contractor. She's one of the most successful freelance assassins operating today. In 8 years, she has completed 37 high-value eliminations without a single failure, until now. Her reputation is built on making impossible kills look like accidents. The fact that we're preventing her success is driving her to take increasingly desperate risks. That makes her more dangerous to everyone around her, including you." The call ended, leaving Rachel alone with the weight of knowledge she had never wanted to possess again. Her peaceful yoga studio had become ground zero in a shadow war between corporate assassins and rogue intelligence operatives, and she was the only civilian who knew the truth about what was really happening behind the facade of mechanical failures and lucky coincidences. The truth about Rachel's mysterious protector emerged through fragments of memory that she had spent 25 years trying to forget. Tuesday night, unable to sleep, she found herself digging through a storage box she hadn't opened since moving to Portland. Inside, beneath layers of dust and regret, lay a photograph that changed everything. Prague, 1999. Rachel stood next to a woman with piercing blue eyes and prematurely silver hair, both wearing the anonymous business attire favored by intelligence operatives working under diplomatic cover. The woman was Sarah Kellerman, Rachel's mentor, partner, and the closest thing to family she had ever known in that shadowy world. Sarah had been a legend within the Strategic Intelligence Division before Rachel ever met her. Recruited at 19 from MIT's computer science program, She had spent 15 years perfecting the art of technological warfare. Sarah could manipulate any electronic system, turning everyday infrastructure into weapons or shields as needed. Traffic lights became kill switches, building ventilation systems became delivery mechanisms, and security cameras became hunting tools. But Sarah's greatest talent wasn't technical, it was strategic. She could see patterns that others missed, anticipate moves that enemies hadn't yet planned to make. Her operations were so subtle that targets often never realized they were under attack until it was too late. Or in some cases, never realized they had been protected until long after the threat had passed. The Prague incident had changed everything. Rachel and Sarah had been tracking an arms dealer named Viktor Kozlov, who was selling stolen chemical weapons to terrorist networks. Their mission was surveillance only, document his operations and hand the intelligence to local authorities for action. But on March 15th, their surveillance revealed that Kozlov was planning to test one of his chemical weapons on a Prague elementary school. 800 children would die, not because they were targets, but because Kozlov wanted to demonstrate his product's effectiveness to potential buyers. Official protocols required Rachel and Sarah to report the intelligence and wait for authorization to intervene. The authorization process would take a minimum of 48 hours. The attack was scheduled for the next morning. Sarah made a decision that ended her official career and saved 800 lives. She infiltrated Kozlov's compound using techniques that weren't supposed to exist, disabled his entire operation using methods that left no traceable evidence, and eliminated him and his 3 top associates in ways that appeared to be accidental. Industrial incidents. The chemical weapons were neutralized. The terrorist buyers were identified and tracked, and the elementary school remained safe. But Sarah had acted without authorization, using classified techniques that weren't supposed to be deployed without oversight committee approval. The official after-action report listed Sarah Kellerman as killed in action during the Prague operation. Her body was never recovered because there was no body to recover. She had simply vanished into the same shadows that had trained her, taking with her the most advanced technological warfare capabilities the division had ever developed. Rachel remembered their last conversation, held in a safe house 3 days after the Prague operation, while bureaucrats debated Sarah's fate. "They're going to burn us both," Sarah had said, calmly packing equipment that officially didn't exist. "You because you didn't stop me, me because I didn't ask permission to save children's lives." "Where will you go?" Rachel had asked. "Everywhere. Nowhere. Wherever people need protection from threats that bureaucrats don't want to acknowledge." Sarah's blue eyes had been sad but determined. "The division taught me how to fight shadows. Now I'm going to become one. What about your life? Your future?" Sarah had smiled, the expression carrying more weight than words. "My life is keeping other people alive. My future is making sure that someone with these capabilities exists when conventional systems fail. The division created me to serve their agenda. Now I'm going to serve a higher purpose." That had been the last time Rachel saw Sarah Kellerman alive. For 25 years, she had assumed her mentor and partner had simply disappeared into deep cover, perhaps working for another agency, or retiring to some remote location. Now Rachel understood the truth. Sarah hadn't retired. She had become something unprecedented, a rogue intelligence operative, using cutting-edge technology to protect innocent people from threats that official agencies couldn't, or wouldn't address. The voice on the conference call had used phrases that only Sarah would know, demonstrated technological capabilities that matched Sarah's specialties, and shown the same strategic thinking that had made Sarah legendary within the division. Most importantly, the Protector had known Rachel's real identity and history, information that would only be available to someone who had worked directly with her. Sarah had been watching. For 25 years, she had been monitoring threats to democratic institutions, identifying operations like Blackstone Solutions, and maintaining surveillance networks that could intervene when necessary. The yoga studio surveillance wasn't random. Sarah had been tracking Diana Walsh for months. Waiting for her to reveal her full target list, Rachel began to understand the larger pattern. Sarah wasn't just protecting 5 people in Portland. She was running operations across the country, possibly around the world, creating a shadow network that filled gaps left by bureaucratic limitations and political constraints. The phone rang. At 3 a.m., displaying only a number sequence that Rachel recognized from their old operational codes. She answered without hesitation. "Hello, Rachel." The voice was no longer digitally altered. It was Sarah Kellerman, 25 years older, but unmistakably the same person who had saved 800 children in Prague. "I wondered when you'd figure it out," Sarah continued. "You always were too smart for your own good. Sarah, what have you become?" "What I was always meant to be. What we both were trained to be before politics and bureaucracy got in the way. Someone who protects people who can't protect themselves from threats that officials won't acknowledge." Sarah explained that Diana Walsh represented just one operation in a war that most people didn't know was being fought. Corporate interests were using assassination networks to eliminate threats to profitable contracts. Foreign governments were targeting American researchers and officials. Criminal organizations were eliminating witnesses and investigators. The division taught us to fight these threats, but only when politicians approved and only when it served institutional interests. I decided to fight them when they needed to be fought, regardless of who approved. Are you alone in this? I've recruited others over the years. Former division operatives who became disillusioned with bureaucratic constraints. Technical specialists who believed their skills should serve humanity rather than agency agendas. People like you who walked away because they couldn't stomach the politics anymore. Sarah revealed that Rachel's yoga studio wasn't an accident. She had been subtly encouraging certain high-profile individuals to attend Rachel's classes, knowing that eventually someone would try to eliminate them. The yoga studio had become both bait and fortress, a place where targets could be protected while threats revealed themselves. Diana Walsh is the key to exposing Blackstone Solutions' entire network. When she fails completely, they'll recall her for debriefing. We'll be ready to follow her back to their operational headquarters and document everyone involved in sanctioning corporate assassination programs. The plan was ambitious and dangerous. Sarah had been building evidence against Blackstone for 2 years, but she needed Diana's failure to trigger the final phase that would expose the conspiracy at the highest levels. "Rachel, I need to ask you to do something that might put you in danger. Diana will return to your class tomorrow. When she does, I need you to give her information that will lead her into a trap we've prepared. But if she suspects you're working with me, she'll kill you without hesitation." Rachel looked at the photograph of her younger self standing next to the woman who had become a ghost. Some bonds transcended time, distance, and official status. Some commitments were too important to abandon, even after 25 years. "Tell me what you need," Rachel said. Diana Walsh returned to Wednesday morning yoga class with a different energy entirely. Gone was the careful observer who had blended seamlessly into the background. In her place sat someone operating under extreme pressure, her movements sharp and calculated, her breathing pattern suggesting barely controlled aggression. Rachel had prepared for this moment, following Sarah's precise instructions. During the previous evening, she had discreetly planted information that would draw Diana into Sarah's carefully orchestrated trap. A casual conversation with Senator Blackwood about her upcoming weekend retreat at Mount Hood, a mention to Dr. Foster about the private research facility where she would be conducting isolated experiments. Seemingly innocent details that would give Diana the opportunity she needed to complete her mission away from protective surveillance. What Diana didn't know was that the retreat location and research facility were elaborate constructs, complete with realistic documentation, but entirely under Sarah's control. Every staff member, every security guard, every maintenance worker would be one of Sarah's operatives, waiting to document Diana's assassination techniques and trace her communication. Networks back to Blackstone Solutions. But the trap required perfect timing. Diana had to believe she had found the perfect opportunity while walking directly into comprehensive surveillance that would capture every detail of her operational methods. The session began normally, but Rachel could feel the tension building like atmospheric pressure before a storm. Diana participated in the warm-up sequences, but her attention was clearly elsewhere. She was processing the information Rachel had provided, calculating logistics, timing, and resource requirements. 20 minutes into the class, during a complex balance sequence, Diana made her move. She approached Senator Blackwood during a partner pose transition, ostensibly to ask about proper alignment technique. "I couldn't help overhearing your conversation about Mount Hood yesterday," Diana said quietly. "I'm actually familiar with that area. If you're going alone, you might want to be careful about the hiking trails. Some of them can be dangerous if you're not prepared." Senator Blackwood, focused on maintaining her warrior pose, responded without thinking. "Oh, I won't be hiking. It's just a private facility where I can work on legislation without interruption. Very secluded, very secure." "That sounds perfect for focusing," Diana replied. "Sometimes isolation is exactly what we need." Rachel felt a chill at the predatory satisfaction in Diana's voice. The bait had been taken. But what happened next wasn't part of Sarah's plan. Dr. Foster, who had been stretching nearby, suddenly stiffened and looked directly at Diana with sharp recognition. "Excuse me," she said loudly enough for the entire class to hear, "but don't I know you from somewhere? You look incredibly familiar." Diana's face remained perfectly neutral, but Rachel saw her hand move instinctively toward her hip where a concealed weapon would normally rest. "I don't think we've met," Diana replied carefully. "No, I definitely recognize you," Dr. Foster insisted, her voice growing more confident. "It was about 6 months ago, at a pharmaceutical conference in Seattle. You were asking very specific questions about my research into military applications." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Diana Walsh was being publicly identified by one of her targets, in front of multiple witnesses, during what was supposed to be a covert operation. Rachel watched Diana's face cycle through micro-expressions: surprise, calculation, threat assessment, and finally decision. At that moment, she realized that Sarah's carefully planned trap was about to become a bloodbath. Diana stood smoothly, abandoning all pretense of yoga practice. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said, moving toward the exit with fluid precision. But her route took her directly past Dr. Foster, Senator Blackwood, and 3 other class members. "Actually," said David Chun, looking up from his downward dog pose, "I recognize you too. You've been asking questions about my investigation into defense contractor fraud. Different name, different appearance, but definitely the same person." Now, Diana was trapped. Too many people had identified her in too public a setting, with too many witnesses present. Her cover was blown, her mission compromised, and her exit strategy completely undermined. Rachel realized with growing horror that Diana's training would now dictate a single course of action: eliminate all witnesses and extract under combat conditions. The transformation was instantaneous. Diana Walsh, yoga student, disappeared entirely. In her place stood someone who moved like liquid death, assessing angles, distances, and threat priorities with mechanical precision. "Everyone remains calm," Diana said, her voice carrying absolute authority. "This doesn't have to become complicated." But complications were exactly what Sarah Kellerman specialized in creating. The building's fire alarm system activated without warning, triggering emergency lighting and automated door locks. The yoga studio's windows suddenly tinted to full opacity, blocking outside visibility. The sound system began broadcasting white noise that would defeat any listening devices while making verbal communication difficult. Diana spun toward the control panel, recognizing sophisticated electronic warfare when she experienced it. "Who's running counter-surveillance?" she demanded, abandoning all pretense of civilian identity. That's when Sarah Kellerman walked through the door that should have been locked, moving with the same fluid precision that Diana had displayed, but carrying herself with the confidence of someone who controlled every variable in the equation. "Hello, Diana," Sarah said calmly. "We need to talk." The two women faced each other across the yoga studio like gunfighters at high noon. Both were clearly elite operatives. Both recognized the other's capabilities, and both understood that only one of them would walk away from this confrontation. Rachel and her students found themselves trapped in the middle of a shadow war that most people never knew existed. Corporate assassins versus rogue intelligence operatives, fighting for control of information that could expose conspiracy reaching the highest levels of government and business. "Sarah Kellerman," Diana said, her voice carrying a mixture of respect and menace. "The ghost of Prague, I thought you were dead." "I got better," Sarah replied. "And I've been looking forward to meeting Blackstone's star performer. Your reputation precedes you." The standoff stretched through seconds that felt like hours. 8 civilians caught between two of the most dangerous women in the world, in a room that had been designed for peace and healing but was about to become a battlefield. "Your move," Sarah said quietly. Diana Walsh smiled for the first time since Rachel had known her, and it was the most terrifying expression Rachel had ever seen. "I was hoping you'd say that." The shadow war was about to become very real, very quickly, and Rachel's yoga studio was ground zero for a confrontation that would determine whether corporate assassination networks could operate with impunity in American cities. Everything that had led to this moment, the surveillance, the sabotaged missions, the protective interventions, had been building toward this single confrontation between two women who represented opposite sides of the same deadly profession, and 8 innocent people were about to discover exactly how thin the line between civilization and chaos really was. The confrontation lasted exactly 93 seconds. Diana Walsh moved first, her hand snapping toward a concealed blade with practiced efficiency. But Sarah Kellerman had spent 25 years perfecting the art of technological warfare, and the yoga studio had become her domain the moment she walked through the door. The floor beneath Diana's feet delivered a precisely calibrated electrical pulse, disrupting her nervous system just enough to slow her reflexes by milliseconds. The air circulation system released a targeted aerosol that would impair her vision without affecting anyone else in the room. The sound-dampening panels activated focused ultrasonic frequencies that interfered with her inner ear balance. Diana adapted with frightening speed, rolling away from the electrical pulse, covering her mouth against the aerosol, and compensating for the balance disruption through pure muscle memory. She was still deadly, still dangerous, but she was fighting an opponent who controlled the battlefield itself. Sarah didn't engage in hand-to-hand combat. She didn't need to. Every surface, every system, every molecule of air in the room was a weapon under her command. Diana found herself fighting not just a person, but an environment that responded to Sarah's will like an extension of her nervous system. The end came when Diana, desperate and increasingly disoriented, lunged toward Senator Blackwood as a potential hostage. The yoga mat beneath her feet suddenly became as slippery as ice, sending her sprawling. Before she could recover, restraint cables emerged from hidden compartments in the walls, wrapping around her arms and legs with mechanical precision. Diana Walsh, who had completed 37 impossible assassinations without a single failure, was captured by a yoga studio that had transformed into a high-tech detention facility. "It's over," Sarah said quietly, approaching Diana's immobilized form. "Your mission ends here." But Diana smiled, even in defeat. You think this is just about me? You think Blackstone doesn't have contingencies? By now, they know I've been compromised. They'll activate backup protocols, eliminate witnesses, and blame everything on foreign terrorists. Sarah's expression didn't change. You're right. They probably would do exactly that. If they still existed. She gestured toward the wall-mounted screens that suddenly activated, displaying federal arrest warrants, frozen bank accounts, and congressional subpoenas. While Diana had been focused on her assassination mission, Sarah's network had been dismantling. Blackstone solutions piece by piece. Your communication logs led us to your handlers. Your financial records revealed your payment sources. Your operational reports documented every illegal order you've received for the past 2 years. Blackstone Solutions ceased to exist as a functioning organization approximately 20 minutes ago. The screens showed coordinated raids happening simultaneously across 12 states. Corporate executives being arrested, private military contractors being shut down, and bank accounts containing hundreds of millions of dollars being seized by federal authorities. Rachel watched in amazement as Sarah's true plan revealed itself. The yoga studio confrontation hadn't been about stopping one assassin. It had been about exposing an entire network of corporate assassination programs that threatened democratic institutions. The evidence package we sent to federal prosecutors contains proof of 47 planned assassinations targeting researchers, journalists, prosecutors, and elected officials whose work threatened defense industry profits. Sarah continued. Your employers made the mistake of documenting everything for billing purposes. Diana's confidence finally cracked. You can't prove intent. Corporate executives will claim they hired security consultants, not assassins. We can prove intent. Because we recorded your mission briefings, documented your assassination techniques, and tracked your payment schedules. More importantly, we have testimony from your previous handler, who decided cooperation was preferable to life imprisonment. Sarah revealed that Diana's predecessor, the assassin who had supposedly been eliminated 3 months earlier, had actually been captured and turned. She had provided detailed intelligence about Blackstone's operations in exchange for immunity and witness protection. The yoga students who had been trapped in the confrontation were slowly released from the building's lockdown protocols. As they filed out, each was briefed by federal agents who had been waiting outside, ready to take custody of Diana and secure the evidence Sarah had collected. Rachel found herself alone with Sarah as Diana was led away in restraints that would make escape impossible. What happens now? Rachel asked. Now the real work begins, Sarah replied. Blackstone was just one network. There are others, corporations using assassination to eliminate regulatory threats, foreign governments targeting American researchers, criminal organizations eliminating witnesses and investigators. Sarah explained that Diana's capture had revealed the existence of at least 6 other private military companies offering similar services. The intelligence gathered from this operation would fuel investigations that could last for years. But I can't do this alone anymore, Sarah continued. I need people with the right skills, the right instincts, and the right motivation. People like you. Rachel looked around her yoga studio, which was slowly returning to its normal appearance as Sarah's technological modifications retracted into hidden compartments. I left that life for a reason. I wanted peace, not warfare. You created a sanctuary where people felt safe, Sarah said. But safety is an illusion if we don't actively protect it. Your students were targeted because they stood up for truth. You saved them by recognizing the threat and acting on that recognition. Over the following weeks, the Blackstone revelations dominated national news. Congressional hearings exposed the depth of corporate assassination programs. Defense contracts worth billions of dollars were canceled. Dozens of officials resigned or were indicted for enabling illegal surveillance and elimination operations. The most significant change was cultural. The revelation that assassination networks had been targeting American researchers, journalists, and elected officials sparked a national conversation about the intersection of corporate power and democratic institutions. Rachel's yoga studio became an unexpected symbol of resistance. The story of how a yoga teacher with a secret past had recognized and helped expose a corporate assassination network inspired thousands of people to pay closer attention to threats hiding in plain sight. Students started sharing stories about suspicious incidents they had dismissed as coincidences. Researchers began documenting patterns of harassment and intimidation they had previously ignored. Journalists investigated corporate connections they had never thought to explore. Sarah's network grew from a handful of rogue operatives to a distributed intelligence organization that monitored threats to democratic institutions across the country. They called themselves the Prague Protocol, honoring the incident that had started Sarah's transformation 25 years earlier. Rachel eventually closed Serenity Springs Wellness Center, but not to return to a quiet life. She became the Prague Protocol's public face, teaching others to recognize the signs of sophisticated threats hiding behind mundane appearances. The most dangerous enemies are those who look like friends, she would tell audiences at security conferences and congressional briefings. They attend your events, join your organizations, and study your routines. But they leave traces if you know what to look for. The Diana Walsh case became a textbook study in both corporate assassination techniques and the technological countermeasures needed to defeat them. Law enforcement agencies updated their training programs. Security companies developed new surveillance detection methods. Corporate boards implemented protocols for identifying when their companies were being used for illegal purposes. 5 years later, when military historians attempted to document significant domestic counterintelligence operations, they would discover that the yoga studio confrontation had prevented not just 5 assassinations, but an entire campaign of corporate terrorism. Designed to eliminate democratic oversight of defense industry activities, Sarah Kellerman remained in the shadows, but her influence became visible through results. Assassination networks found their operations consistently disrupted. Corporate conspiracies were exposed before they could be implemented. Threats to democratic institutions were neutralized by interventions that appeared coincidental but followed patterns that suggested sophisticated coordination. The Prague Protocol had proven that when institutions failed to protect democracy, individuals with the right skills and commitment could fill the gap. But more importantly, they had demonstrated that such protection was possible without sacrificing the transparency and accountability that democracy required. Diana Walsh served 15 years in federal prison before being released to a witness protection program that included psychological rehabilitation and vocational retraining. She eventually acknowledged that her capture had been inevitable once Sarah Kellerman decided to stop her. "You can't fight someone who turns the entire world into their weapon," Diana said during her sentencing hearing. Sarah Kellerman didn't just defeat me. She made it impossible for anyone like me to operate without being detected and stopped. Rachel's final words at the congressional hearing that established new oversight protocols for private military companies were simple but profound. Democracy survives not because it's perfect, but because people are willing to protect it when it's threatened. Sometimes that protection comes from unexpected places, conducted by people whose existence can't be officially acknowledged. But the protection is real, and it's necessary, and it works. The yoga studio where it all began was eventually converted into a training center for civilian threat recognition programs. A small plaque by the entrance read, "In memory of the ordinary people who do extraordinary things to protect others, and the courage to recognize danger hiding behind familiar faces." Because sometimes the most important battles are fought in the most peaceful places by people who understand that true security comes not from weapons or walls, but from refusing to let evil hide in plain sight. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.